we started the cancel culture thing, and it's wild how people are walking on eggshells today because they don't know what to say and they don't know who they're going to offend.
Well, we were talking on the elevator today with someone about the old Archie Bunker show, which would never, Norman Lear would have been run out of Hollywood if that show had been put on TV today, or Maude, or a lot of the shows that people understood that they were there just to make a point. And Archie Bunker was a perfect foil for people who said, he's an idiot, but... And at least you had a conversation. Now you'd be afraid to put that on TV.
I don't think there's a better explanation to how vast and how quickly things have changed than using the All in the Family. It was called All in the Family, right? I don't think that he would have been canceled. I think he would have been behind bars.
Well, I mean, really. And Rob Reiner, who is a real lefty, would certainly never have appeared on that show, or Sally Struthers. These actor and actress would not have even been in the same stage room with the people that were making the show. But back then, it was a top show for CBS.
You know what's really interesting? You talk about actors, and there's the mass exodus via California, specifically into Florida, and all these left-leaning actors realize that they're not that left anymore. And there's room to be in the centrist, but once it starts impacting their own backyard, then maybe you need to revisit. And there's a mass exodus coming down here.
And they're also revisiting some of the parts they played over the last 10, 20, and 30 years, revisiting whether that was an appropriate part for them to have played.
I didn't think about it like that. That's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, you're using today's lens to try and view what happened 30 years ago. And whether it's going to be, do we take down these monuments because we don't want to glorify Robert E. Lee and then forget that we had a civil war? Or do we go ahead and say, these things happened, let's understand how they happened so it doesn't happen again? Or do we just cancel it?
I went to a university in Toronto called Ryerson University.
Mm-hmm.
It is no longer called Ryerson University because they looked at history and supposedly Ryerson was a slave owner, took everything down, changed it to Metro. But I have a feeling that we're gonna go into all kinds of different rabbit holes here. But first, I want to introduce you guys, and Pam and Bob Weinroth.
It's our pleasure to be here with you. It's a different day for me. I'm usually the host, and to be hosted and be sort of part of conversation like
this. What's the name of your podcast?
It's Palm Beach County Perspective, which I'm already on episode 73.
Really?
Yeah, so we've been doing it for a while, and I try and put a spotlight on all the positive things that are happening here in Palm Beach County.
Which is why I have you on the show. I actually didn't even get a chance to properly sample your podcast yet, but I most certainly will. We were connected because you guys bring a perspective to the table that is really going to resonate with my listeners, and that's people that are in transit trying to come down here. They were looking for resources and learning about the space around them. And I wish a podcast like mine existed before, because I would consume in volume. It didn't exist for me. I didn't know anything about Palm Beach. I didn't know anything about Boca. I didn't know anything about the education system. So.
Well, neither one of us were born here. I mean, Pam comes from Canada, as you know, and I come from Long Island. And the only reason I'm here is because I had relatives living in Century Village. We used to come down here, visit them for Christmas and Passover and the holidays. And I said to my ex-wife, I said, before I'm gumming my food, I want to go down to Florida and live there. And so at one point, we actually relocated, brought the kids down, and, I've never looked back.
All I knew about Boca was Century Village. I thought that this is where you came to retire. I didn't want to use that word, but yeah.
But it was retirement, and it used to be that you, especially in August and July, the restaurants were empty. You could make a left turn at every intersection on one light, and in fact, we'll talk about it later, but like the Boca Chamber created an event that they call the Boca Chamber Festival Days for August, because it was just like there was nothing happening. So let's put something together. We'll put the nonprofits and profits together. We'll create an event. It'll give them a way to shine and let people know what their mission is and give people some place to go. We don't have to do that anymore. Right now, in the middle of the summer, something is always happening, whether it's at the city, whether it's just in paid performances. And the restaurants, you still need to make reservations even in the middle of July.
Yeah, and you can't find parking. But let me introduce you guys just so people understand the context. Pam, you are like me. You are a Canadian refugee.
Yes, although born in New York.
Are you born in New York?
I was born in New York, so I did have U.S. citizenship, so it was easier for me to get here.
Cool.
I did move to Winnipeg when I was 14 months old.
Why Winnipeg?
That was an interesting story. My father was from New York. My mother was from Winnipeg. And when they got married, they moved to New York. And my mother he was in education at the time, and my mother could see it was going to be a lot of competition for him to get ahead.
New York competition? Have you ever heard about that before?
No such thing.
So she said, I think we should move to Canada. And he said...
What a bold move.
Yeah, he said, okay, I'm open. Where do you want to move? She said, Vancouver. That was always her dream. And he said, why would we move to Vancouver when we don't know anybody?
And for most people from the U.S. like me, Vancouver is as far west as you can go in Canadian provinces. To me, Canada is just the 51st state, and she hates when I say that.
But
it's 3 hours above north of Seattle.
That applied a lot more, that statement, pre-COVID, and now the divide is way bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah. So my father said, no, I'm not moving to Vancouver. We don't know anybody. Let's move to Winnipeg because your parents are there.
Oh.
So my mother couldn't argue with that.
She should have, though.
Yeah, she should have. She knew
Winnie the Pooh was born there, by the way.
Well,
in Winnipeg?
Not really, but...
The author of Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
He had no idea what the winters were like, so he was game. Sure, let's go. And so I was 14 months old, moved to Winnipeg. And it was a great career move for my father because he did become, from teacher to vice principal to superintendent of schools.
So here's an odd fact for you. My wife, who spent most of her formative years in Canada, her sister has a Canadian citizenship. Her children, Pam's children, are Canadian. Her ex-husband was Canadian.
Both. They're dual. Everyone is a dual citizen.
All right, but there's only one person in this room, besides me, who is not Canadian. My wife. She did not take out her Canadian citizenship until she left and coming down to America, United States, and they said, why didn't you get it? I said, I didn't think I could. They said, you could have, but since you're leaving, you can't.
Yeah, at the time you had to denounce any other country's citizenship. So I had all rights and privileges in Canada except to vote. And I said, well, why would I denounce it if I have all the rights and privileges? And, when you're 18, 19, you don't really think about voting as much as
Sure.
That being something you must do, especially in Canada. So I just kept the U.S. citizenship until we were moving, and the consulate in Calgary said, why didn't you take out U.S. citizenship? I'm like, what?
And of course, I could have jumped onto her citizenship in Canada. So in case I was going to get drafted at my ripe age, I could go back to Canada.
I see. Look at in case I get drafted. You don't hear stuff like that from Canadians. There's no such thing as a draft.
I had a lottery number. I'm old enough to have gone through the lottery, and I had the number 132. And so I was sitting there.
What did that mean, the lottery number for the draft?
For
the draft, when it was Vietnam, to figure out who they were going to send to the rice paddies, they had a number. And based on your birthday, they would pick out a ping pong ball. And if you were September 1st and that was the first number pulled, you were number one. And that would mean, unless you had some way to get out of it, like you were 4F because you were...
what does that mean?
4F would mean that you were... physically unable to do what you have to as a soldier. Or if you were in school, then they would have 1S and 2S. 1S if you were in high school, 2S if you were in college. They had all sorts of deferments. But at the end of the day, if your lottery number was up, you probably were going to serve in the armed forces. I was very lucky. Even 132 kept me out of the draft. And
would you have gone? Or I guess you didn't have a choice, would you?
I mean, look, a lot of my friends wound up in Canada. Some of my friends did go to Vietnam, and some of them didn't come back. So it was a tough time.
People don't understand
kids
that.
the boys do register for service, regardless of the draft right now.
But it's all volunteer now.
Every one of our children, they register at 18. They're required. The boys are required.
How did you feel about that?
One, they had Canadian citizenship if anything went wrong. But
I'll tell you, I have a very interesting perspective on that because I'm an immigrant from Canada, but I'm also an immigrant to Canada via Israel. And my parents left right before my brother was about to be drafted because my mom had my dad serving in the Israeli military, and he's an immigrant from Russia, where he served as well. And the first Intifada, if you know what that is, happened, and my brother's best friend took a bullet in the arm. And my mom said to my dad, she said, "There's going to be a war. There's going to be 3 of you out of the house at the same time." It was me and my brother. So, it goes 3, all my men are going to be out of the house. She goes, "I'm not going to make this. I'm not going to withstand this. We need to leave." And my mom and dad had a conversation, and I will never forget this, where my dad said, "No, we were established here. We're good." And one night, I was about 6 years old. The sirens go off, red light everywhere. My dad said to my mom, "Maybe you were right," because he was doing a military reserve service.
Sure.
And in 5 minutes he zipped up, and he had an M16 under the bed. The clip was somewhere else. This is a 6-year-old. This is how we're taught in Israel, right? He's downstairs in 5 minutes. Military truck takes them all away. My mom's now got a 6-year-old, and my brother's 8 years older than me. And he says to my mom, "You were right. They thought a war broke out." Turned out it was an oil refinery that had a leak. But, the sirens go up and everybody's in this mode. You're trained as an Israeli. So when I hear military service, first I have a lot of admiration for it. I think it's very difficult on mothers. I think it's very difficult on fathers. But it's different when you come from different places in the world. And Canada was one of those places that you always consider safe. But we're safe because of the United States. Or Canada is safe because of the United States.
And I'm proud to say that my son is in the military service, but he is in the band. So instead of carrying a rifle, he carries a trombone.
Yeah, but if shit hits the fan,
they're
going to switch that out real quick.
Exactly.
Right? And he'll be one of the first people to do that. I don't buy any of that. You fight for what you believe in, right? Sure. Which is why we're down here. So, Pam, what do you do in this world of Boca or Palm Beach County?
What I do now and what I came to do are kind of two different things.
Talk about being executive director.
Hit me.
Maybe start with why Boca.
Sure.
Why should people consider Palm Beach County?
Excellent way to start.
I was sitting at the time in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and I said, "I got to get out of here."
I don't blame you. Have you been?
Well, obviously. Well, I wasn't there at that time. This is her ex, but she tells the story of how her son was sitting there in the snowsuit with the arms straight out. Because he can't move because he's got the mittens that are attached to each other.
And the scarf all around your mouth, and only the eyes peek out. And I looked and I said, "Oh my gosh, there has to be a better life somewhere else."
For the Americans listening, and I'm going to offend some Canadians, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan is like where Santa lives. It's like where God sat when He made the rest of the earth. But it gets really cold there.
Yeah, Saskatoon berry
pie. Yeah.
Pie, yes.
So we were in Saskatoon, and I just said, "You know what? This is not a place for children to grow up." And I looked at the different places I could move to that would be better. And my sister was in Toronto, so that was an option. I had an aunt and uncle in Seattle, which is an option. My sister-in-law was in Los Angeles, and I had an aunt and uncle in Boca. And I said, "I just want to know one person." I looked at all 4, and I said, Boca Raton was the least expensive.
Which is crazy.
My, how times have changed.
Of course.
I still think, when thinking back, it's still the least expensive of the 4.
What I say to a lot of people that ask me, and I'm in Boca by accident, and we picked the school. My kids go to Donna Klein. We picked the school and then everything around it. It is still grossly undervalued.
Yeah.
Well, Boca really, and like you said in the beginning, people thought of it as a retirement community.
Yes.
People thought that this was where grandma and grandpa are, and we'll go down and see them at Christmas. And for a long time, they didn't need schools. They didn't need the kind of infrastructure you need for growing families. And I remember coming here 30 years ago and watching a lot of these schools plop down these portables were nothing more than glorified mobile homes where they were teaching the kids because they didn't have any place else to put them. There were so many people migrating south.
And how long ago was that?
This is, about 25, 30 years ago.
Gotcha.
I mean, the world has changed quite a bit since then. They've done a lot of building of schools. But, of course, now we're seeing this mass migration from the Northeast post-pandemic, and we're starting to build schools again.
I could tell you that there aren't enough seats for the amount of students that are coming down.
Well, especially in the private schools. You mentioned Donna Klein.
10-1 right now.
Yeah, and
I've had the head of school on my podcast, and
we're familiar with DK because Pam's two children started there.
Really?
Yeah. So
God!
And we're very friendly with the people over Torah Academy, and we know that they are looking to expand because they just can't accommodate all of the children who are coming here.
So I think my wife is servicing Torah Academy and growing into that community. Oh my God, we have so many synergies. This is so cool. So, 2 kids.
I have 2 kids. Bob has 2 kids. The kids were raised together, and they do, although they're 37, 36, 32, and 30, they grew up as siblings. They have the sibling rivalry. They compare what one gets if the other gets, and I don't get, and how come it's not fair? And,
And they do a comedy routine because we both had Davids, or we still have Davids.
We still have 2 Davids.
So the older one says to his friend, "This is my brother David and my other brother David."
So, okay, what do you do now?
I am the executive director of Boca West Children's Foundation, which is a foundation formed out of the Boca West Country Club by members who
well-heeled.
They are retired and moved down here full time and felt that they had a little bit more time than they thought. They didn't have to spend all their time golfing and playing tennis, and we could give back to the community. And they incorporated in 2010. This is we're just finished our 13th year, and we have given away to local charities, Palm Beach County, just about $20 million.
Kol hakavod. Wow.
And they focus on the children. They've tried to stay on the impact on the children. They realize that if you're going to try and address poverty, if you're going to try and address their success in college and their success in public school or private school, you have to go all the way back to the fundamentals, making sure they have a bed to sleep in, making sure they have food on the table, making sure that all of the things that they need to build a foundation are there. So they have focused on the children that are in dire need in our county.
Wow. So you guys
we have a diverse county.
Can you explain that a little bit?
The diversity?
Yeah.
There are some very, very wealthy sections of Palm Beach County, Palm Beach Island, for example, and very, very poor sections like Belle Glade and Pahokee.
And Riviera Beach, which is right next door to
Singer Island.
Singer Island. So and even in Boca Raton, people think, Boca Raton, everybody drives a BMW here. We have people who are in need, that they are food dependent on other people, whether it's Boca Helping Hands, giving them the food that they need to keep the family eating, or whether it's Spirit of Giving, or whether it's any number. And I said, putting them in a bed, we have a nonprofit that was created by a PTA mom here who saw a need for kids to at least have their own bed to sleep in at night because they were getting to school so tired that they couldn't study.
They discovered the kids were either on the floor or sleeping 3 to a bed.
Wow.
So I think to date, since she incorporated, I think it's 8,000 beds she's given away in Palm Beach County.
Wow.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of this is right here in Boca. So we have a homeless population here in Boca that we have to address. We have, again, food dependent people. And of course, there
That's
are
not enticing people to move to Boca.
No, I don't think. I don't think you need to entice people. I think you need to give them the reality. Nobody thinks that there's a there's a utopia that exists anywhere. Because if anybody tells you that, they're lying, right? There's always a point of view that you come from, and then when you move, kind of like us, and you guys are transplants yourselves, it's always in the hopes of doing better. And you talk about the charities and the stuff that you're doing. I know, having my parents immigrated multiple times now, like the more you give, the more you get. I know that sounds like a selfish way of doing things, but the more you help other people in need, it fulfills you in so many positive ways that incentive, like that energy comes back out, and then you are able to attain more, right? Boca is like a very pleasant surprise for us, but we also live in a bubble. And I don't see all of Boca, which is why speaking to people like you and understanding, what it is that you do, the homelessness or, the poverty or the help, you don't see that when you see the Rolls Royces and the Bentleys and the play. Like I parked here, there's, some very beautiful cars.
To hear the word food insecurity in the same breath with Boca Raton, you say, really? But it is a thing. And like you said, there's a very nice living for most people. But there is that fringe that you can't ignore. And we are very fortunate that there are so many charitable, giving people in our community who have the wherewithal to either put their hand in their pocket, and if they don't want to put their hand in their pocket, ready to roll up their sleeves and get involved in a nonprofit that it resonates with them.
When you say things like you wouldn't think of Boca like that, you don't think of Boca like that when you're in Boca and you understand how it works. When you're like me, when you're coming down here, I didn't think of Boca like that as an affluent.
Did you remember Jerry Seinfeld, the
Boca Vista? That comes up all the time, and that's how people.
That's kind of a play on Century Village.
Right. And Century Village, for those that don't know, is a 65 and over community, and
I think 55.
Well, it was.
Is it?
But it was 55 and over 30 years ago. You know who's living there now.
Right.
They're 85 and on their way out the door. So you're dealing with Kings Point and Century Village that are an elder population, and also a population that we have to be careful about, because when we get hurricanes, and I know you say can't shovel hurricanes, but we get them occasionally here. When they do hit, we have to be very careful of those people who are living in those facilities to make sure that if the lights go out, they have some way to get downstairs, because if the elevator isn't working for 3 or 4 days, that may mean that they're not going to get any food.
So you guys are a legitimate power couple. I mean, between being executive director and the former mayor of Palm Beach County.
That's me.
Right? So you have an understanding of the nuances that go on in Palm Beach County that most people, you need to live 10 or 20 lifetimes to even scratch the surface of. But what was it like being the mayor? Why did you decide to be the mayor? And you have to explain what you're doing for District 5.
Okay, well, let's back up, because
it's a lot, right?
I tell people that the reason I got into public service is Pamela and I used to do lobbying for a nonprofit we were involved with. I would go up to D.C., I would go to Tallahassee, and I'd look at her and say, these men and women are no smarter than me. I think that I can do this job just as well, if not better. And so originally got involved in city politics. I was on the city council in Boca Raton for 4 years. And when an opportunity arose for me to jump to the county commission, I took that opportunity and won a seat up there. I was a county commissioner for 4 years. One of those years, I was the mayor of Palm Beach County, but that's sort of an honorary title that the seven of us county commissioners designated one of us to be the mayor, the person to stand in front of the microphone when the hurricane comes and say, hunker down, it's coming, and tomorrow we can get out and enjoy. But public service is very gratifying, and it's also very empowering because you have a seat at the table. And I certainly miss that right now, being out of public service. You mentioned District 5. I was the county commissioner for District 4, but I am going to be looking for a potential seat on the county's school board in District 5, but that's, a year down the line.
Okay. So what's going to be the platform, and how can this podcast help you?
You know what? I think you and I know that as parents, the most important thing to us is that our children should be able to take their place in the world economy. And how do you do that? You have to learn. You have to be literate. You have to be able to know your math facts. You have to get past a lot of this chazarai that is around you, all this static that's interfering with the basic premise that if you're not literate, you're not going to be able to learn what you need to learn to be able, again, take your place in the economy. If I am successful in becoming a school board member.
When you are successful.
If and when I will be focused on the charge of making sure that the students have the tools that they need to be successful. And
how are you going to do that?
Well, I mean, look, I could spend the rest of the show talking about the idea of making sure literacy is the first thing that we focus on. We have a nonprofit that Pam is very involved with called Roots and Wings. They took it upon themselves to work with the children in Title I schools, which are the schools where the children are on the free breakfast because they don't have at home. And these are children that they're working with to raise their reading levels so that they have a fair chance to learn the materials they need to learn. We need to make sure that every one of our students has that ability to read. Right now, only 60% of the children in the fourth grade, when they arrive, can read at grade level. That's a sin. That is going to cripple them from that point forward, because you learn to read through third grade and then you read to learn for the rest of your life.
Most of the people that I know that have touched down here, and I think it's kind of coincidental, and not most, I'd say 50-50 split, have ended up in private schools. But a conversation is usually had at some point with a lot of families, is private schools are very, very expensive. We want to know the public school system, and we want to know that it's solid. And then you have this relationship that directly correlates to real estate values and the school districts and the zones.
Well, if you're in an affluent community, you're pulling children from those affluent homes, and so you're going to tend to have a better quality of student as a base, making it easier to teach them. If you're coming from an area that is with communities that are, let's say, mobile homes, or areas where the homes are not of a high value, you're dealing with, again, children that have a handicap walking in. They may not have both parents there or a parent there, and you're not going to have the kind of focus on education at home. So there's a lot there. But, you mentioned private school. Pam and I are of different minds. Pam's children went to private school. Both of mine went to public school. Mine went to public universities, Florida State University. Pam's older child, who went to college, went to a private school. When we look at them today, there's not a big difference in the way that they have been able to take their place.
Yeah.
So, I am very satisfied with the public school education they got. The governor of Florida just signed a bill that's going to give parents an opportunity to make a decision to put their children in private school that's not going to be as impactful to their wallet, because they'll be.
From what I've been told, it's only if the school is willing to accept the voucher, and a lot of private schools don't, because they don't want anyone dictating what happens behind the closed doors.
I'm not sure if they're going to have to accept the voucher, which is $8,000, as the total amount that they can take as tuition. Because I was just reading before I came in here today that some of the parochial schools are actually.
What does that mean?
The schools,
Religious.
the religious schools.
Okay.
Some of those schools are actually raising their tuition because they see parents having the ability to get a voucher and taking some of the pressure off of them, and so they're going to take advantage of the opportunity to raise their tuition or take away discounts from multiple children in the family.
Isn't that what America's about?
Of course, free enterprise. That's
Right.
what we're all about.
And that's what the public schools will have to become.
They will have to compete. The public schools will have to.
Can you elaborate that? Because I don't understand what you mean.
Well, the fact is that for most of us, and I'm included, you made a decision, do you want to go to public or private? And before you decide to go to private, you weighed how that impacted your budget. And
Yeah.
my wife at that time and I looked at it and said the benefits that we would derive from private school didn't outweigh the education they could get for public school for, in quotes, free. I mean, nothing's free.
Sure.
We're all paying our property taxes either through rent or through ownership of a home. And so you're paying for their education. If I'm already paying for it, I have a right to demand that education be of a quality that's going to get them to the level that they need to, again, get a job or the career that they want. So, but public school now is going to have to compete with the private school because now a parent says, I have the opportunity to get $8,000 voucher from the state. So I can make the decision to go to Donna Klein, to Torah Academy, to XYZ, and say, you know, maybe for the $2,000 or $3,000 that's going to come out of my pocket, that differential is worth giving my children an edge on a person who is going to a public school. Public school has to say, I need to compete so that we keep students here because if too many students get vouchers, that money's coming out of the budget for the public schools.
So what's your perspective? Is that going to be a good thing, the competition, or not?
Isn't free enterprise great?
Well, like we said, free enterprise is great, but I think that we all have to recognize, and this is the important thing, that we all are going to have to watch this experiment. We don't want to deplete the public schools of the high-end students and wind up something like you've seen in some of the inner cities. In New York City, you had white flight. You had people leaving who had the wherewithal to go to private school, so you were left with children who had nowhere else to go. And now you had a school system that was really not able to compete with the private schools. We have to make sure that the public schools are not going to lose their edge and their ability. We are very happy with the idea that in Palm Beach County, and especially in Boca Raton, we have many A-rated schools. Now, I could go ahead and say maybe the rating is not as it should be. It's not as, competitive as it could be. But if we are going to be able to attract people to our piece of the world, our piece of paradise, the first thing that a parent is looking at is safety, and then they look for the education of their children.
Absolutely.
So,
which is a big component of why we landed at Donna Klein. I mean, it's part and parcel for a lot of things, but especially for us, everybody heard about Parkland, and just before we came by, there was the incident, the tragedy in Uvalde, and it's a reality that isn't a reality in Canada.
And look, safety is since, like you said, Parkland has been on everybody's mind. We have, they used to have resource officers, which was a euphemism for a retired, security guard.
Yeah.
Now there are police officers in those every one of the schools, and we have safety concerns where we restrict the access to the school. You used to be able to just walk in there and pick up your kid, or just walk in and see what they were doing. Now, I mean, they give you the third degree. They give you an adhesive sticker with your picture on it, so everybody knows whether you belong in there or not. Not that makes it 100% safe, but there is a move afoot to even do metal detectors or to make sure that you are basically creating the same kind of atmosphere as when you walk into the airport, and you have, after you've walked through the metal detectors, a feeling that you're in an area that's safe. And so our children, we need to make sure that they're safe when they're in the school.
So this experiment, you're saying you're worried that the top end students may end up leaving to private schools.
If the public schools are not able to maintain the quality of the education because they claim that they don't have the money anymore and that the teachers are leaving because they're not being paid enough. Well, I mean, we've raised the minimum salary for our teachers here finally from what used to be $42,000 to $50,000. Not that that's a great salary, because if you live here in South Florida, try and find an apartment or a house if you're only making $50,000 a year. Yeah. But at least we are doing something to try and bring the level of teaching and the instruction to a level where we can compete with the private schools. If that is lost, and if people feel that their children are not getting the education they need, and they have the wherewithal between the voucher and the money they have in their bank account, they're going to put them in a private school. And like I said, like we've seen in some inner cities, you're going to wind up with the only children there they're going to be the ones that can't find a way out.
Should parents that are moving down here from other states or other countries have confidence in the public school system in Palm Beach County?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because, again, it's a matter of, we have testing here. We have, until recently, we had statewide testing. They called them FCATs. And this was a way of measuring whether, someone in Okeechobee County and someone in Palm Beach County and someone, in Flagler County, all those children were being measured on the same criteria to make sure that they were meeting basic requirements of reading, writing, history, whatever. I think you can be confident that, and as I said, I was confident enough to put my children in public school, and I wouldn't have changed it. I think that they got an excellent education. They were able to go from there to an excellent state university system, FSU, FAU, and all of the Florida state universities and colleges are great places to get an education. But, there are opportunities to go beyond that.
There is a program that I'm not eligible for because I'm here on a visa that you guys would for sure know this, that you can lock in the tuition for college today and you kind of pay into it, and then we have what's called in Canada's RESP, so Registered Education
That's a
Savings.
retirement fund. This is specifically for education?
No, so we have one for retirement, that's RRSPs, and we have one for RESP. So you can put it just for your kids for education. So it's comparable to what it is they have.
You can do a 529 instead of...
What is that?
Which is a prepaid tuition.
How does it work?
Same way as Florida. It's Florida prepaid.
Yeah.
Florida prepaid.
Okay, can you explain that?
Well, prepaid, and I don't mean to interrupt my very lovely wife. I may pay for that later.
Oh, you're going to.
Florida prepaid has been a terrific opportunity for parents to put money aside quickly while the child is even pre-K. When my children were born, I immediately took out the contracts for them for college. So
how does it work in practice? Like, what does it look like?
It looks like you have 3 contracts. You have a contract for tuition, you have a contract for dorm, and you have a contract for fees. And that contract can be for 2 years or 4 years. And what you're doing is basically starting to save early based upon the cost of education
at that point in time.
At that point in time, exactly.
Right.
So your little pisher is, just born, and so you're not worried about 18 years from now what the inflation is going to do to it, because that money is going to continue to grow. So there's an actual...
And that's only if they use a school in the state of Florida.
Only a state school in Florida. Well, no, only a school in Florida. It doesn't have to be a state school.
Yeah.
What if they go somewhere else?
Then they give them the value of their account with some modest interest. But it certainly...
So you're not allowed to take that money and invest it on your own?
No.
At 529, they'll do that for you.
Okay, so that's the difference. That's the main difference in an RESP. I manage that. I also have somebody else that manages, but like that aspect, I'm buying equities. I'm speculating. I'm buying, stuff that has a yield on it and it's on a drip, and I'm just
Right. I had the one child that went to private school. I knew he was not going to go to public university.
How did you know that?
He wasn't a student.
No, Michael.
Oh, Michael.
You're definitely getting into trouble.
Well, we have two children there.
I had nothing to do with this, by the way.
He went through Donna Klein.
Yeah.
Graduated,
all the way?
Well, he graduated through 8th grade. They had a very tiny high school.
Right. The high school is new.
Was brand new. And in 9th grade, he was going to be one of 9 kids. And I said, that wasn't quite the high school experience, but he still liked the small school. So he went to North Broward Prep. So I
heard they have a phenomenal hockey program.
Yes. So throughout his years, he's always been in a small private school. So I knew a school like UF was not going to be good for him.
Okay.
So I bought a 529 for him and invested the money that way because I knew doing a Florida prepaid, I was going to get that back with simple interest, and that wasn't going to.
So 529 allows you to take your money, manage it, invest it as you see fit, use that towards education.
I just let them do it, but yeah.
Is it a tax deduction? I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah. The 529 is a tax deferred. If you use it for education, there's no taxable consequence. If you take it out, you use it for buying a house or whatever, then there would be a tax consequence. But I am not a tax attorney or tax accountant.
I do not mean to step on this. Yeah. I wish that I have and I can already I need 6 more hours with you guys at least. But we I wanted to ask from my own perspective, and it wouldn't really matter now. Wouldn't defer or. Why would you say people should move confidently to Palm Beach County?
It's a much easier lifestyle.
In what way?
We have stresses here. Everybody has a stress. Life happens, but it's so much easier when the weather is just beautiful every single day.
Look, you talk about you can't shovel hurricanes. I think that's appropriate, and certainly we do have hurricanes down here. In fact, we are approaching today the beginning of hurricane season.
I bought my generator.
We'll talk about that. If you give me a couple minutes, I just want to
I'll give you all the minutes.
Well, I want to do a PSA later just for our people who've just moved down here to give them a little familiarity of this season that they're now in. But,
I can tell you now I want a part 2. So okay. I'm claiming a second date.
Okay, we'll do a second date. But, like Pam said, this is so less stressful living down here. The weather is nice. Living around palm trees, living where there's so many recreational amenities.
Outside. The kids are outside. They ride their bikes to school. That doesn't happen in January in Saskatoon or Winnipeg.
Or Boca Raton, or in East Meadow where I was born, or Roslyn on Long Island. I mean, this is a whole different lifestyle. I worked in Manhattan for years. You fought to get into the city either on the Long Island Railroad.
But that accent doesn't leave you guys, you New Yorkers. I'm telling you.
It does not.
It doesn't leave. It's like fungus. It just stays there forever.
The kids do make fun of it.
Well, when I went to university, Northeastern University in Boston, they'd say, "Where'd you come from?" I said, "Long Island." I said, "Where's the Island?" and I immediately said, "Oh, Long Island."
I didn't want to say my Long Island joke that I've used on the podcast many times, but it's got to be the longest island in the world because everyone from Long Island is here.
Look, it's a big place, and I'm grateful that my parents moved out there from Queens, but I am much more grateful having found Boca Raton and South Florida, because this is the place. And as I said, post-pandemic, people who have realized that they can live down here and still make a good living, especially if they're still working virtually, are very happy. And a lot of the financial services from Stamford and from Manhattan have relocated down here because they say, we don't need to be there anymore. So West Palm Beach has become Wall Street South. We have a high-tech area that Scripps has been developing up in Jupiter. We have an area here that's an incubator for new companies called the Research Park at FAU. We have a woman who runs our business development board of Palm Beach County who has been working for the last 20 years at attracting companies down here. So especially Boca Raton has like 30 of the 60 national headquarters right here. whether it's Office Depot, whether it's ADT. I mean, we have some very large companies that have realized this is a great place to be able to attract Modernizing Medicine, which is a homegrown company. There's all sorts of opportunity here. This is, as I said before, used to be a place where Grandma and Grandpa came. Now people have come here with their families. They are enjoying the benefits of 5 miles of public beaches in Boca Raton alone, having all these recreational amenities, parks, and all sorts of places to go. And it's just great. And people complain about the traffic. You know, we kidded about it before. I mean, I said, you know, during July you could make a left on one light. All right, so maybe now it's 2 lights, but it's nothing like down in Miami, and it's certainly nothing like New York on the Bronx River Parkway.
Miami's brutal. It's horrible.
In October, I'll have been here 34 years.
Wow.
I still, and others will tell you the same thing for living here that long. We still look out at the palm trees. We still say it is the best place to live, and we live in paradise.
I can in earnest tell you the same thing, that this has been the most stressful year of my life, my marriage, my transition into becoming a full-time dad. It's the first time in many years that, you know, I think about finances in a different way, because you're establishing new businesses here, and medical costs and school costs. And very often my wife and I will have this like moment of like wafting gratitude, and where I'm like, look at where we are. It's really amazing. And when I become old and gray, you know, 120 years, I don't want to look back and say, you know, I didn't take those risks. I didn't do those things. I want to say, oh shit, what a ride that was.
Yeah, and look, and like I said before, I didn't want to be down here gumming my food. I didn't want to wait until I was 65, 70 before I came down to enjoy it. People come here for a 2-week vacation after working 50 weeks a year up north, just so they have 2 weeks of what we enjoy 52 weeks a year.
It's like you're sitting in my head. I'm reminiscing on a route that I did. I shouldn't have done in hindsight, but I took a U-Haul full of my kids' toys. Everything else didn't make it. It was the maximum you can take. It was a 26-foot U-Haul. My brother took the ride with me, and we have a very tight-knit family. And he's like telling me, he's like, why are you doing this? Have you lost your mind? Are you having some sort of midlife? And I said to him, are you going to have a place here one day? And he said, yeah, probably. You know, it's like the rite of passage is one of those things. And I said, when are you going to do it? He goes, well, when I get, you know, older and I want to, you know, semi-retire or whatever. And I said, I don't want to wait.
Right.
And I have no regrets about any of that.
There's no reason to wait.
There's no reason to wait.
There is the same opportunities here. Yeah, I mean, look, the salaries are a little bit different.
Standard, like day-to-day expenses, more expensive here than Canada. Let me put that out.
I don't know. I was just in Toronto and I looked at the...
Not taxes, but...
No, restaurant prices. I'm like, whoa.
I'll give you an example. Private school. It cost me Canadian, $21,000, I believe, per kid. It's $30 here. I'm paying for medical insurance, but I don't pay. No, I'm not saying I don't pay.
But you're going to get those $8,000 vouchers.
I don't think Donna Klein accepts them. I'm not going to. I have to verify that.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to make any claim that it wouldn't matter. And I want to. There's so much we can dissect. You talk about private school and public school. I'm a product of public school. Okay.
But Donna Klein is a different story, because Pam wanted her children to have the religious education.
That's why I'm doing it.
I didn't move to put my kids in private school. I moved here to put them in Jewish day school, of which Saskatoon, Saskatchewan had none.
And so we're speaking the same language.
Yeah, and I agree that my children were more secular than her children, because they had that infusion of religion in their day-to-day education.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's what you resonate with and what you find important. I see, you know, your response there. I have something that people don't talk enough about here, and I really want to get your take on it. We touched on it about safety, but is Palm Beach safe? Guns are everywhere. Do you, or have you ever encountered any situations that you needed to have a firearm on you?
Never.
You know, look, I think that Florida is known for being a red state. Our governor has made it plain that he wanted this to be a state that you could have open carry. He has been able to have the legislature change the law that you
Recently, right?
Recently, in this last legislative session, they've changed the law, and you don't need to go apply for a permit to carry and conceal.
What does that mean? If I am an American, I can walk into a store, buy a gun, strap it on me, and Bob's your uncle?
Yes, but you can't show it. Right now, it's still carry and conceal. They did not go to the next level of have open carry, which I think
Texas,
would be,
right?
It's Texas, but it gets to be a little foolish, But let's say this: it's a safe area. People feel comfortable because, number one, the police here in Boca Raton are very, well trained, and they have a good handle on crime. The sheriff's department, which works mostly in the unincorporated areas of the county, is a very professional force. Our sheriff, Rick Bradshaw, has been in that position for over 20 years. He's been very involved in the protection of President Trump.
Have you had him on your podcast?
Actually, I don't remember if we have had Rick here.
But I'd love to have him on mine.
I think we did, because he came in uniform one day.
All right, so then he must have been here. It's after 73 episodes, I don't remember every single one of my guests. But we are very fortunate. And as I said, when you look at a community, first thing you look at is safety. And then you start looking at the next things, obviously school education, employability, and other things get in there. But this is a very safe community. There are pockets of crime that you certainly want to stay away from, areas that are known to be.
But it's the same way when you travel to Israel. People say to you, "Why are you going to Israel? Is it safe? Are you sure? Are you going to be okay? Are you going to be okay?"
I actually haven't had anyone explain it in that way, and it actually makes perfect sense.
There's places here in some cities, you do not want to go.
Or you're careful.
You're careful.
I mean, when I was going to school in Boston, there was the area on the other side of the tracks where you didn't go if you didn't want to have
New
a
York
problem.
City, you're very careful where you go.
I hear New York's gotten predominantly
And it's gotten worse. In Chicago, too, I've heard. Yes, there's probably areas in Boca at night, maybe you don't want to go. And I'm not saying that people are carrying guns, but you could get mugged.
Are you guys carrying guns right now?
No.
Would you admit to it if you did?
I would admit to it. I don't have to admit to it because I'm not carrying. I will admit to the fact I have a license
Concealed
to carry.
weapon. Yeah. Right.
So, I don't feel...
I would carry. I'm not allowed. I walked into a gun store here, and because I'm on a visa, I can't get around it by getting a hunting license. I can get long guns, but I'm not eligible for the other. And it is like when I get my green card, that in hand, I walk right into a gun store.
Right.
And I'm not a gun-toting guy. I just want one because I can have one now.
Well, we've had some rabbis here that we've talked about the issue of gun safety, and there are a lot of congregations now where they make sure that there is someone or some people in there that are carrying.
Always.
Because you don't want to create a sanitized facility where the only person carrying the gun is the bad guy who just walked in.
That's what happens when you have, once the Pandora's box is open, you want to know that there's people that are carrying.
Exactly. Why do you have sky marshals?
That to a Canadian is so, crazy, right?
It is, but didn't you have something in Ottawa?
We had the quintessential Canadian, what's it called? Draw, or like, what are those when two people face off against a gun?
A duel?
A duel. The truckers, that's probably what you're referring to, during COVID that ran up.
No, but there was something at Parliament or something before, years ago.
No, there was a guy who literally in Rideau Hall, which is where the Prime Minister lives, hopped the fence and tried to get at the Prime Minister. Again, not a shot was fired. The fact that he was able to climb the fence, I mean, that's Canadiana right there. Imagine somebody trying to climb the fence towards the White House.
Oh, they've done that.
Well,
Really?
tried.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
And
they haven't-
and recently.
Oh, really?
Well,
Okay.
actually, the last thing I heard
And they
was
didn't take a bullet to the tuchus?
well, if they got close enough, they would. But the
no
last
doubt.
last I heard was a child actually got either under or through the fence, and they grabbed him. But
Okay. I'm talking about malice
I know,
intent.
I know.
But we did have that trucker rally that you guys all heard about, and that was Canadian.
We were cheering them for the truckers.
So were a lot of people. But this is where the breakdown happens. They called martial law, and the only other person to have ever done that is Trudeau's father, right? And history is repeating itself here. They didn't fight. They didn't shoot. They came there, partied, drank beer. Not a punch was thrown. Made a statement. Were a giant nuisance. Locked down the city, but they did it in the most peaceful way that anyone could possibly do it, and they were treated as if they were enemies of the state. And then if further to that, people that had supported them via GoFundMe, and I know people firsthand that this happened to that supported them, had their accounts frozen. I mean, how far down the rabbit hole does that have to go in what you believe to be a democracy?
well, that's happily it's not something that's happening here yet, and hopefully it won't.
I hope it doesn't. And there's no such thing as a perfect place. But what you do get down here, especially now, is a conversation between people like yourselves and us that are here because they want to improve their lives. They love the life that they're living right now, so they want to keep it that way and improve it. And when you get a community of people that is like-minded and trying to better themselves, is when you're really going to establish a camaraderie between people that want to keep a place clean, safe, prosperous, healthy, right? And that's what's coming down here, because the kind of people that are moving down here are very much like-minded in many ways. And you guys came down into the podcast, took your time out of the day. You have so much to say. I have so much more I want to hear. I'm full of gratitude for the fact that you guys are down here. Is there anything you guys want to leave the listeners with before you go?
All right. Well, as I said, I want to do a quick PSA.
Please.
Because some of our people who've just moved down here in the last year, and we have over 1,000 people showing up every day in Florida. So not here in Palm Beach County, but Palm Beach County gets a lot of them. Hurricanes are not something to be afraid of. Hurricanes are something you prepare for. Right now, June 1st means that it's the beginning of hurricane season, and we actually have a sales tax holiday that is running today through June 9th, and then will run again later on. I don't have the dates in front of me. So you should go out and get your batteries, get the things that you need for that eventual possible hurricane. But hurricanes are not like tornadoes. They don't just show up. We'll see them coming from Africa. They will be news reports for weeks telling you as they're coming across the Atlantic. And so you'll have plenty of opportunity to make a decision whether you want to evacuate, whether you want to hunker down. And for the most part, people should hunker down, because we since Andrew, which was a big hurricane, which really took Homestead off the map, was a result of that, we have changed the way that we build our buildings. And so now most buildings will stand up to a Cat 5 hurricane. And that's a very, very hard wind that would possibly topple, something up in Manhattan. But what I want to leave people with is this. If a hurricane's coming, listen to the weather reports, listen to the public service announcements, listen to the news coming from your city or from your county, and be reasonable, be careful, and just make sure that you make a decision that's right for your family. And that's it. These are, events that we deal with because we are in South Florida, but they're nothing like mudslides and earthquakes out in the west. They're nothing like the nor'easters and the 20-inch snowstorms in the northeast, and they're certainly not like the tornadoes that they deal with in the Midwest. So I'll leave you with that. I really want to thank you so much for inviting us here, Ronan. This has been a lot of fun, and I do look forward to coming back and continue our conversation.
Amazing. So much gratitude. Have the best day.